India would happily do that if we gave them a trade deal that looked similar to what we have already with Chile or Australia. And I'm not just saying that because my name is Vivek freaking Ramaswamy here, okay? In fact, part of the reason that we have a relationship of mistrust, I would say a relationship of trust with India that could leave room for improvement, is that we haven't had the kind of trust-based dialogue between our two countries. And so, you know what, if I'm not going to get that done by the end of my first term, I would consider that a personal failure on an ethnic count. But this is how we think about deterrence of China. Bolster our relationship with allies who share our interest in deterring Taiwan while pulling Russia out of China's hands. I'm a big believer in the Second Amendment here at home. Let's turn our Second Amendment into an export. That's what American exceptionalism is about. Leave it to Taiwan to adopt a Second Amendment of its own. Put a gun in every Taiwanese household. Train them how to use it. That's how you turn Taiwan into a porcupine. This is how you deter China. But why is it in our interest then to deter China from going after Taiwan if we're not doing the same with respect to Russia and Ukraine? The answer is it comes back down to American self-interest. Taiwan is responsible for the leading-edge semiconductors that power our modern, technologically facilitated lifestyle. Probably these lights that are shining in my face, the phones in our pockets, the computers that we type up our notes on, those cameras that are recording me in the back. These are powered by leading-edge semiconductors that come from this tiny island nation off the southeast coast of China. I think it's regrettable that we got to a place where our modern way of life depends on that island nation, but that remains a fact. Which is why I've said that we will move from our, I believe, inexplicable posture of strategic ambiguity with respect to Taiwan in my first year to a position of strategic clarity, where I will be clear with China and with Taiwan that we will defend Taiwan if China invades Taiwan before we have semiconductor independence in this country. I will lead us, I hope by the end of my first term, to semiconductor independence in this country. By 2028, I believe it is possible in the United States of America. And thereafter, we will be very clear that after the U.S. achieves semiconductor independence, our commitments to send our sons and daughters to put them in harm's way will change after we've achieved semiconductor independence. These are naked views that you're not supposed to share in public. Right? These are the things you're supposed to keep in a hush-hush format, sweep under the rug, to know that you kind of mean these things, but you don't actually say them. I actually believe it is in our interest to unapologetically state to the world what I will state to you all at home, that it is my moral obligation as the next U.S. president to stand for the interests of Americans here in the homeland without apologizing for it. When I tell the rest of the global leaders that I mean it, they will know they can trust us. And it's not really credible to say that we're going to defend democracy selectively when the democracy of the day we're defending is a nation that has banned 11 opposition parties, goes after religious minorities and churches, and has consolidated all media into one state media arm. That's Ukraine, if you weren't wondering. It doesn't make sense, right? But if we say that, no, we're going to be very honest. Our engagement outside the Western Hemisphere will be limited to the circumstances where it actually advances U.S. interests. Then that puts Taiwan on notice that a nation that's supposedly at threat of annexation is now spending less than 2% of its GDP on its military. It better step that up to 4% by 2028, which is where it'll need to be to have a chance of defending itself. It'll put China on notice to say that, you know what, you have some nationalistic unfinished business from 1949 when Mao Zedong and Chiang Kai-shek had at it. But you will not mess with the United States and our interests by holding an economic gun to our head, by taking a shot for going after that island, until we have semiconductor independence in this country. This is how we smoke out realism, revive Nixonian realism in the modern day. revive George Washington's vision of what it means to put the interests of this nation first. This is an uncomfortable shock to the modern bipartisan foreign policy establishment. I'm an outsider. That is what I believe it will take to turn our foreign policy establishment back upside down where it belongs. That is what it will take to get our NATO allies who spend more than half of whom less than the 2% they're obligated by treaty to actually spend on their own national defense. That is how we restore sanity to a world in which we represent 36% of our allied GDP while spending 61% of our allied defense. This is not the stuff of advancing American interests, but it will take an outsider with a fresh perspective to actually restore American interests in our own foreign policy. What I will say in closing before opening this up to a few questions tonight is that I reject the other bipartisan consensus in Washington, D.C. It's the flip side of the same one that has us continuing to send $200 billion to a nation around the other side of the world that we have no interest in. The flip side of that is an assumption embedded in there that Republicans and Democrats alike will agree to today. The assumption that we are a nation in decline. The assumption that we're at the tail end of the Roman Empire and that we have to puff our chest to project a self-confidence that does not exactly exist here at home. I don't believe we have to be like ancient Rome. I don't believe that we have to be a nation in decline. The truth is, I think what we really are is a nation that's just a little young, going through our own version of adolescence, figuring out who we're really going to be when we grow up. And when you view it that way, it makes sense. When you go through adolescence, you go through that national identity crisis. You go through that identity crisis of self. I did. Maybe many of you did. You lose your self-confidence. You lose your way a little bit. You forget who you really are. But we are stronger for it when we reach our adulthood on the other side. So you know what I say? We are not a nation in decline. I believe we can still be a nation in our ascent. Maybe in the early stages of our ascent. Maybe we're not even at base camp yet on our way to that mountaintop, still that shining city on a hill, where no matter who you are, where your parents came from, what your skin color is, how long your last name is, that you still get ahead in this country based on your own hard work, your own commitment, your own dedication, and that you know what, you are still free to speak your mind at every step of the way. That is the American dream. That is what we are running to. That is how we revive our strength at home so that we may set an example of what is possible for the rest of the free world. That is our obligation to the world, to be strong at home. That is what I will revive as your next president. Thank you all. God bless you. God bless your families. And God bless our United States of America. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Ramaswamy, thank you very much. We do have time for just a few questions. Our first one, sir, off to your right.
Thank you so much. Your writings on stakeholder capitalism are more relevant than ever today. Given the rise of supranational institutions like the World Economic Forum, how would you recommend the U.S., on the one hand, balance maintaining its soft power with respect to relationships, and on the other hand, ensure first and foremost that our own economic interests are represented on the international stage?
Yeah, well, I have a very practical answer to that question, and then I have a deeper answer of what's at stake. My practical answer is, if it comes in an acronym, FTC, SEC, FBI, DOJ, WEF, WHO, NATO, UN. We may have good reasons to be skeptical of the purpose of any acronymized institution. I say that only half flippantly, okay? The truth of the matter is what's at stake in the debate about stakeholder capitalism? This idea that businesses and multilateral institutions should look not only after their own institutional purpose, but also should solve other societal problems at large, from global climate change to systemic racism in the West. It's really a 1776 question, actually. Because the basic premise is that we, the people, cannot be trusted to solve existential questions like climate change. That we get it wrong. That we'd burn in a planet entering an ice age, which is what they said during Richard Nixon. That was going to happen, actually. We were going to have global climate change, they said during Nixon. Time magazine and Newsweek covers around that time said that that's what's going to happen unless we stop burning fossil fuels. Now they say we're going to heat ourselves to death if we keep burning fossil fuels. They say that we, the people, can't be trusted with those questions. So business leaders and government leaders and three-letter acronym institutions have to work together, dissolving the boundaries between the public and private sector, dissolving the boundaries between nations to work together towards the global common good. We fought a revolution in 1776 that said no to that vision. We said that for better or worse, and this is a crucial part of that, for better or worse, the way we do it on this side of the Atlantic, on this side of 1776, is that we do trust the people to sort out our differences through free speech and open debate in the public square where every citizen's voice and vote counts equally. That is how we do it. And so what we see today is that old ugly monster rearing its ugly head again. That old world European version that distrusted the public. That's what's at stake, is our sovereignty itself. From the WHO to the UN, it is fundamentally skeptical of sovereignty, especially the sovereignty of a nation founded on rejecting that monarchical vision. And I think that the deeper question to ask is not what comes from the outside that causes us to cede our sovereignty, but what is it in